All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our January 23rd, or I'm sorry, 22nd meeting of the MSAD 51 Board of Directors. So I have one item for action before we start our recognition component, and that's the approval of the January 7th minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor? All right, great. So the next item that we have, I'm going to start with the Count Me In recognition. So Count Me In, for people in the audience or at home who don't know, it's a partnership with schools, businesses, youth and state community organizations. And so what it does is it works to improve student attendance. And it says also engagement and academic achievement. So we have 3 students who were winners of our poster project, which was really exciting because I believe there were 7 posters total for the state in this program were produced, and 3 of the 7 winners were from Greeley. So it's really quite remarkable. So we have some certificates to hand out, and we have our students who are the recipients. So I'll head on to the podium. My first time standing up here. All right, so the first winner for the Count Me In project poster was Eva Dews. Great work, thank you. The next winner is Isaac Barr. There you go, Isaac. All right, Jordan Young was the 3rd winner of the Count Me In poster project. Jordan, not here? Okay. All right, well, really great job, guys. It was pretty amazing and remarkable to see 3 of the 7 winners from Greeley, so good work. Thank you. And then we also have another recognition tonight. Our resource officer, Kirk Mazuzin, is going to be just giving a brief introduction about the project Sticker Shock, as well as introducing some students that participated in that project.
Hey everyone, thanks for inviting us here tonight. My name is Officer Mazuzin. I obviously work for the Cumberland Police Department, but this year I've taken on the role as the School Resource Officer for the MSAD 51 School District. So I work in all the schools primarily. I'm here in the high school, but you also see
You'll
me.
have to go on the microphone, sorry.
Oh.
They can't hear you at home.
Oh, at home. Want me to start my whole song and dance over?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Hi everyone, thanks for inviting me here tonight. My name is Officer Mazuzin. I'm the School Resource Officer for the MSAD 51 School District. I'm primarily housed here at the Greeley High School, but I do work in all the other schools in the district, the Wilson School and the middle school as well. This past, what did we do, December? Was it December?
Yes.
In December, we partnered with Casco Bay Ken, which is a Casco Bay Create Awareness Now. It's a organization that works with parents and students and teachers to provide some more information about some concerns with our youth about drug and alcohol use, and just giving parents some information and some power to talk to their youth about these issues, important issues going on, and try to work with community partners to forge some strategies to combat those issues. We did a project that was done with several other high schools in the Casco Bay area. Gray New Gloucester participated, Falmouth, Yarmouth, and obviously Greeley. And it was called Project Sticker Shock. And what it does is it works with the school resource officer and students in those schools, and we go to area businesses and we put stickers on all the alcohol containers that are being sold in those businesses. So for the Cumberland, North Yarmouth areas, it was, we did J Brothers and Food Stop, and we also went out to North Yarmouth and did North Yarmouth Variety. It's just a really good way to show the partnership between the community and the school and the police department about businesses not selling to people under 21 years of age, and getting the youth involved with that process and showing the importance and responsibility that these business owners and the adults in the community participate and take in this. So I'm going to introduce our participants that helped us out with this project. I will say that it's difficult sometimes to get youth to volunteer for things like this, and I will say that these guys were more than willing to volunteer their time and their energy to help me with this project, and I want to give them a lot of credit for taking time out of their busy schedules and day to help me with this. It was important. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to the community and the school and the businesses as well. So here we go. First up, we have Jake Cunningham, who is, you know what? I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, man. I prefer that. Well, as you said, my name is Jake Cunningham. I participated in this program last year as well, and I just think it's a really great program. And I'm now going to allow this guy.
My name is Elijah Shear. I work over at Food Stop, one of the places that we went to put stickers on the alcoholic beverages. And I get a lot of people coming in asking like what the stickers are and everything. It's just kind of, it's good to know that I can explain them to them, like explain to people what it means and show them that I was part of that and helping out the community.
I'm Keegan Wilson, and I'm a student at Gorillaz. And I heard Jake do this before, and I just thought it was a good idea, so I did it. That's all I have to say.
Keegan also is we're having a youth summit next week at the town hall, and it's a bunch of area people coming to the town hall, meeting with various youth from these Casco Bay schools, and getting a chance for the audience to ask questions to the students about their experience at the high school, particularly related around their perceptions around drug and alcohol abuse and stuff like that. And it really gives students a chance to make their voice heard about some of these issues that are going on right now. And Keegan's one of our participants next week in that process as well. So it's very helpful. We also had one other student that joined us. He was unable to make it tonight, but CJ Bates was a participant in this and helped us out as well a lot too, but he was unable to make it tonight. So again, thanks everyone for your time and letting us come talk.
Thank you. I'll give everyone a minute to, if they'd like to shuffle out before we get to the really exciting stuff. Thank you again, everyone. So the next item is we're going to move into the presentation component, and as most of you know, we recently had a space conducted of the entire district that looked holistically at space utilization and space needs. So our facility co-chair is here, Mike Brown is here to kind of give us an overview and presentation on the space study.
Yes, and good evening, everyone. I apologize for the late arrival. I was putting the finishing touches on the PowerPoint presentation. It's just a couple hundred slides. I hope everyone, there is no PowerPoint presentation. Both kids home with the flu, but still wanted to present the information related to the space study here this evening, and just share a little bit of the history and kind of what led us to this point. Those of you who have been around for a while, a little over a decade ago, the school board commissioned NESDEC and Policy 1 to conduct an enrollment study. In the end of 2010, that enrollment study actually was showing declining enrollment. There was a lot of reports, even statewide, that students were fleeing the area. Most young couples were fleeing the area. And our district was one in decline. Based upon that information, In the end of 2010, the Board of Directors voted to close Drown Road School. Those students were relocated over to MIW, and at the end of the 2013 school year, NYMS was closed. 4 or 5 were moved over to the GMS facility. We never actually saw the continuation of the decline that was originally noted in the reports. It seemed like the student population generally held and then actually began a little bit of an uptick. Based upon that information, back in 2015, the SAD 51 Board of Directors Superintendent's Office partnered with North Yarmouth, the towns of North Yarmouth, and Cumberland to do an updated enrollment study. This data was presented by Planning Decisions in 2016, and they indicated that this was not a bubble that we were seeing. It was actually a trend that was contrary to what was presented in the earlier reports, and that we were, in fact, a growing district. So there's a couple convergence of circumstances related to this. One is the growth of the city of Portland. Obviously, that growth has been relatively explosive with rapid expansion of several industries, WEX, IDEX, Unum, et cetera. As people are relocating to this area and they're looking at communities, the communities of Cumberland and North Yarmouth are both highly desirable. 2016, 2017, we continued watching enrollment. You probably saw some reconfigurations of some space in MIW. You probably saw a couple of trailers appear out back. Still seeking to sort of judge the veracity of this data, it appears to be accurate. As of today, we have about 250 to 300 more students than what were indicated in the NESDEC and Policy 1 enrollment studies. And the wild card in all of this, state mandated pre-K. So the facilities committee took a look and engaged with Steve Blatt, architect. Steve has a long history with the district. He designed the middle school and has been involved in multiple projects, and just asked to take a sort of a holistic, high-level look at all of our facilities, determine how we're presently using them, and then how we could configure them to maximize space, highest best use. In other words, just trying to figure out where else to put classrooms. Unfortunately, at this point, we have exhausted those opportunities within the facilities. And it's not just classrooms, that's core and support spaces as well. This is libraries, cafeteria, gym, special ed, music, small meeting space, and gifted and talented space. The report doesn't make a recommendation, but the report, the space study that will be available on our website following this lengthy presentation, it does sort of offer up a couple of suggestions, a couple of avenues. But the avenues that are being suggested are well outside of the purview of the facilities committee. So at this point, sort of turning that space study back over to the administration and the entire school board, looking for guidance on what to do. A couple of options were to expand 1, 2, 3 facilities. I don't think anyone wants to do all 3, but take a look at that. There was also a suggestion of a grade reconfiguration. And then there were suggestions of the return of an intermediate school, whether that be in addition to an existing structure or as a standalone or an early childhood education center. Obviously, a lot to talk about, and but that's the information as presented in the facility study.
And I know some members of the board have seen and worked with the study more than others. I think that we're going to be, are we workshopping it again this year?
Probably.
Yep. And I know it's going to be a major focus of the upcoming elementary education task force as well. So do we want to take questions now? Anyone have any questions, for Mike? And if, I think the whole board's seen it. It's going to be available on the website. How many pages is it? 33 or 50 something? So it's a lengthy document.
It is, and there's some schematics and some drawings and illustrations. I would definitely encourage people to avail themselves. Again, this is sort of a high-level sketch. The board itself has had several internal discussions, workshop meetings on this over these last 2 years. still hoping, that it was a bubble. That's certainly easier to manage, but this is the real deal.
I think the space study too also signals that I think the board is very committed to getting it right this time, to really, we want to look at every data point that we possibly can to make sure that we are making the best decision for the district and community in terms of what happens next, because we're certainly growing really quickly. Do you have anything else you want to add, Jeff?
No, we just recently asked Rebecca Wandell, who formerly was of Planning Decisions, and she's agreed to update all of our enrollment numbers. Enrollment numbers right now are from 2016. So she will be, in the next few months, we'll have those updated numbers. She'll be using the same report that was done in 2016, use the same formulas that were in that report, and then update those numbers to see if, in fact, the enrollment projections that show about 2,300 students in our district by 2025-26 will hold or not. So far, Planning Decisions has been right on the money. We're now into our third year looking at those numbers, starting our third year looking at those numbers, and they have been right. They've been spot on. So.
Great. Thank you.
And next, Jeff is going to go over that elementary education task force timeline and membership as well.
Okay, as Mike was talking about the space study, we are going to actually start talking about what would be the next step with the space study. And so I'm going to share with you tonight a draft facilities timeline that we have been asked by the board to look at and come up with a draft timeline for the board to consider. And that was that request came in at a workshop, I believe in December, where the board workshopped this topic and asked the administration to start putting together what would be a preliminary timeline for moving ahead based on the recommendations or the results of the space study. So tonight I'm going to do that. And we're not asking the board to act on this tonight. We're asking the board to consider this information. And I think the plan was to ask the board to consider voting on it on February 4th, which would be your next meeting. So I'm going to try to increase this just a little bit. This is also in your packet. So this is the proposed timeline. Tonight, the membership and the timeline is being submitted to the board for review. And then February 4th, which is not on there, would be approval of the membership list and the timeline. And I'll share the membership list in just a minute. A task force organizational meeting, and again, this is all draft, up to the board's decision on these things. We'll be using the space study as a baseline, and then sometime in late February or early March, that task force would begin. They would have an organizational meeting, and this is all part of your strategic plan. In your strategic plan, it does spell out, it actually calls it a steering committee, same thing as the task force. The next piece would be preparing an advertisement and an RFQ for architectural services. After the task force has begun meeting 2 or 3 different times, that group would begin the work of putting an RFQ out. And if whatever the magnitude of this project is, we're going to need architectural support to work with us on this particular project, whatever the end result is. And then in June, we would be asking the board to authorize that RFQ and then advertising for an architect right after the board authorizes that, if you choose to do that on June 3rd. Then interviews would take place for an architect to begin working on concept design with the committee. Those interviews would take place over the summer in August. And then there will be a workshop at the end of August. You have an annual summer retreat at the end of August each year. And during that retreat, we would certainly introduce the progress of the task force and where it stands at that point, and just give an update to the board. Interviews, second interviews for an architect would continue. Those would take place in September. And then we're hoping by the middle of September, which is the second board meeting in September 2019, that the board would vote on and accept an architect moving forward to develop a concept design for the whatever project it is that the committee is recommending. So the task force in draft form would start in February and would continue through January of 2020. So it would be about a year. And based on similar projects that I've been involved with, and Scott Poulin and others, usually committees like this run for about a year in order to get the work done. The Art Center took about a little bit less than a year to complete. After that, considering that the task force is continuing its work and wants to come up with a concept design in concert with the architect, in January 2020, there would be some sort of a final decision that was made on a recommendation that would then go to the board of directors. So if this draft timeline pans out, by that time in January 2020, there would be a last meeting and a concept design ready to go to the board. And then the board would have a chance to look at that concept design in a workshop on February 3rd, 2020. And then the board would hold a meeting the next month in March of 2020 to discuss the project concept on camera. And I would assume that whoever the architect is at that time would give a presentation on whatever the task force's recommendation is for whatever that project may or may not be at that time. Then the board would hold a public hearing on April 6th of 2020, these are all regular board meetings, by the way. These aren't special board meetings. These are all regularly scheduled ones. And after that, the school board, after having a public hearing, would then approve the concept on May 4th, 2020, if it wishes to. And if that happens, there will be a series of informational meetings that would take place after the board approval of the concept design. So the board would not be approving it going to referendum. The board would just be approving the concept design that's been put forth by the task force, if this all goes as it's drafted. And for the Art Center, we had a bunch of informational meetings we held in different locations around the community. We had a number of people that showed up at those meetings. So if you remember those informational meetings, these would be much like those informational meetings, a little more informal. We give people a chance to come to meetings and ask questions and get as much information as they felt comfortable getting. And at that point, the board would consider whether or not it wanted to recommend a referendum on the project. And so there would be a referendum informational meeting, which would take place at a board meeting on September 8th. And if that occurs, then we would start processing the information that would be needed to get ballots put together. And then the board would have an opportunity to call the election, if it so choose to do so, on Monday, September 21st, 2020, again, a regular board meeting. And at that point, all the hearing notices, delivery of warrants, much like we do for the budget each year, would need to go out, and we have all those legal deadlines that we would need to do. And there would be another public hearing, and this is a public hearing that would be held in October of 2020 in advance of the referendum, to again give the public an opportunity to weigh back in and say what, if there's anything that needs to be said about the project itself and the referendum coming up. And after that public hearing, all of the warrants would be posted, and the referendum would be held on November 4th, 2020. So this entire timeline assumes that the board is interested in calling an election or a referendum on the presidential election date of 2020. So if that date is not the date that the board is interested in down the road, or does not want to go there and wants to set a different date, a special election, the board has the prerogative to do that, and we would adjust this timeline based on whatever date. But we had to kind of decide on a date and put a date out there. And in this community, it seems like most elections for any sort of building project tend to occur on either a gubernatorial or a presidential election year. So we went with that. And then the rest of it is basically all of the legal deadlines, and we have not come up with those beyond declaring the results that the board would do after the referendum results are in. And so the rest of it is TBD. But obviously, if the referendum passes, it would be like the Arts Center project. We'd start putting together a building committee that would start planning more of the detail work around whatever this project would look like and the scope of it. And all that information we would have to start putting out there in the timeline. So again, the board asked at the workshop that the administration prepare a draft timeline and schedule for your review. And that's what I'm presenting tonight. And I'll answer any questions. Scott's available to answer questions as well. He and I work together on putting this timeline together.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions, comments that they would like to share?
I have a question. Do we have any updates on pre-K? Anything at all?
The only update I have tonight is that there is a bill that's going before the legislature, and this bill has a lot of support from the governor, the commissioner, Maine School Management has been very involved in this particular bill, and it seems to have a lot of traction right now. And this bill is calling for the legislature to start moving some of the CDS identified students to the local school districts in 1920. So that would be this fall. It would only be a portion of the students who are identified through CDS, about 50% of 4-year-olds in a particular community who are identified as needing special education services in our child development services right now, or going to be in child development services, would be identified in the first year. So that bill has a lot of traction. I did talk with someone at Maine School Management last week, and again, nobody really knows what the legislature is going to do, but the feeling was that that bill may pass, but it will be delayed by 1 year. So instead of happening in the fall of 19, it would happen in the fall of 2020, which is back where we thought this all would begin. But in the newspaper, of course, things start happening when a new governor takes office, things start taking off. And there was a lot of talk about moving the timeline up to the fall of 19. Now I'm being told by Maine School Management at least, even if that bill passes, there'll be some sort of an attachment to the bill that people think will go forward because of space considerations, financial considerations, that it would be delayed by a year. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? But there is a lot of traction right now around pre-K in the state of Maine. New administration has taken office, so. Kevin?
When we, excuse me, 50% of the identified folks coming out of CDS, what does that mean in real numbers for the district?
So 50% of identified 4-year-olds
4-year-olds.
would be about 12 to 15 students for us, somewhere in that range, on any given year. And next year, we're looking at those numbers right now.
And so would you anticipate a similar percentage, a similar number when you incorporate 3-year-olds in as well?
Yes, yep. But right now, the bill that's looking viable is just 4-year-olds.
Okay. So then with that, and is this another unfunded mandate, though, or do you anticipate with the exuberance of a new administration in Augusta that there would be additional funds available to help to make this possible within their timeline?
So I checked in with both of our legislators in this area that I've been communicating with, and both said that they felt there would be some sort of financial attachment to the bill, whatever that is, and there would be consideration of space. So if there's a space issue in your district, you would have an opportunity to apply for funds. Whether or not the legislature acts on that, nobody knows.
Okay.
But I think there is a good feeling in Augusta that there are a lot of districts in Maine, just like ours, that have no space, and that adding financial resources to the budget right now, especially this late in the season, would be very difficult to do. And that has to be thoughtful and timely. And when I spoke with Maine School Management last week, that was something that was reiterated to me as well. So again, nobody knows, but I think there is a strong consideration amongst the legislature that this can't be get the local districts to do this without funding it. There's always been discussion about funding pre-K, but I think the biggest wild card is space. If you have no space, you're dealing with a whole different set of financial issues
Thank
at
you.
this point.
And I think it's a pretty common, held belief in the community. I mean, the two towns know as a whole that we're out of space, and some of our schools and some of our grades. I mean, not even that we're squeezed for space, we're more than squeezed for space. So I looking at this timeline when I was reviewing it, this gives us almost 2 solid years. It gives us a really good amount of stakeholder input. I think this is a nice timeline that's really going to give us the chance to really just look at everything, think every configuration, every option through. So I think it looks good, and I know you're going to talk about this in a minute, but we have a really sizable task force that will be reviewing the data, discussing all the options as well. So, I mean, we've all kind of known this was coming, and I think, the 2020 referendum really gives us the opportunity to really engage the community and its various stakeholders and really get an accurate picture of the landscape. So I think this is a good first move.
So we're going to ask you to take this up as an approval item on February 4th. If the board is not interested in the presidential election of 2020, then we would be interested in knowing what another date is, because we have to work those timelines out. So the sooner that we can get a signal that date might not be something the board's interested in, the better off we are, so we can start working those numbers or that timeline differently. So, any other questions? No? Okay. Do you want to go through the membership list then?
Sure.
So the membership list is something that Kate and I have worked on, making sure that we have an appropriate number of stakeholders and making sure that the representatives of all the stakeholder groups are on there. And we've had a lot of different people weighing in on the membership. For example, the teachers that are included on the membership list, I contacted the association for help on that. For at least one of the parents, I contacted the PTO and asked for help on that. So different people weighed in, or different groups weighed in on who would be appropriate. So basically on the task force, I believe there are 18 people, if I counted correctly. Sherry Boothby is a parent. Mike Brown from the Facilities Committee and Board of Directors, of course. Jenna Burke is a teacher at Mabel Wilson School. John Hankinson is a parent. Sally Laughlin, Director of Academic Services. Carol MacArthur, the 4th and 5th grade principal. Dina McFarland is a teacher at GMS 4-5. Tyler McGinley, obviously on the Board and Facilities Committee. Madeline Panici is a student, obviously a student rep on the board. Kate Perrin as the board chair and as ex officio, and often in these projects, the board chair sits as the ex officio on these kinds of committees. Scott Poulin, Director of Finance Operations and HR. Myself. Susie Robbins is the principal of Mabel Wilson. Gigi Sanchez, BOD and Facilities Committee. Jen Spears is the chair of the North Yarmouth Select Board. Shirley Story King is the vice chair of the Cumberland Town Council. And Karen Bruder is a pre-K provider in the community and would be the pre-K representative, since that's such a large piece of the puzzle in figuring out the elementary facility piece. So I think there's 18 people on that list. Again, we asked the Select Board in North Yarmouth, that went through the Select Board for a name. The Cumberland Town Council, that went through the Town Council. and both managers as well, and giving us names. The board members that are serving on it are members of the Facilities Committee. I think when Kate and I discussed it, it was important for continuity that those who have been serving on the Facilities Committee just automatically are on this particular task force to continue the work of the space study. So I don't know if there's any questions. Margot?
Is Madeline a senior?
She is. And we discussed that. And I asked Madeline, obviously she's graduating in a few months, and what did she think? And I don't want to speak for her, but she is planning to go into elementary education. And she said she has a passion for it, and she really just wants to, even if it's for a few months, after that we would find another student to serve on the task force. But she definitely wanted to spend a few months.
That's great.
So.
I think this is a really strong group of individuals that are, and I think it's also really important that we've got Cumberland Town Council as well as the Select Board with some nice overlaps of people in the community, students in the district, staff in the district. I think it's going to be a really great group that's going to really work through the data and the problem at hand. So does anyone have any questions? We will be voting on the membership as well at February 4th meeting.
Yep. Both those items will be up for board approval.
So anyone can contact Jeff or myself or anyone with questions, discussion prior to that date.
I want to thank Kate for all of her guidance on this, on both pieces, the timeline and the membership. We traded a lot of emails and conversations on these things, so.
It's nice to see it taking shape.
Yes.
So our next item is the mid-year strategic plan progress report with Jeff as well.
So the mid-year progress report is always an exciting thing to present. Hopefully it's exciting for you too. So I thought the easiest way to do that is just to go back to the beginning. So this is the first year of our new strategic plan, and the strategic plan is obviously our guidance in the district in the direction of where we want to go. And this is the second strategic plan. Both of them are 3-year plans, so we're in the first year of a second 3-year plan. And the strategic plan, and I'll make this a little bigger for you, obviously has 4 areas that we're looking at. And we just talked about early childhood education, the critical building block. That's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle as we move forward. So that's 1/4 of the strategic plan. Wellness, foundation for teaching and learning, is another huge area of our strategic plan that we're doing a lot of front loading right now. Every student, college and career ready, that has a lot to do with response to intervention, literacy in the classroom, looking at those important interventions that we do with students and making sure they're on track for graduation, and skills for the 21st century, skills for life. That's dealing with creativity and innovation in the classroom, dealing with extended learning opportunities, and different ways of looking at critical thinking skills and how we get those into the classroom. So those are just kind of refresh everyone, those are the 4 major areas of our strategic plan. And at the beginning of the year, you might recall I introduced the top 10. I introduced the top 10 to all of our staff as well back in August. And I'll just quickly go through the top 10 of our strategic plan this year. So this is the top 10 just for 2018-19. So in looking at recertification, we have a new recertification committee that Sally Laughlin is heading up, and that committee is a group of people that look at recertification for our district. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure happened was that we had ed techs that were involved in our recertification since state law had changed. And so we have that, so we can actually say that we've completed that one. And the second one is developing a staff mentoring plan for teachers in their first 3 years in the district. And that one is in progress. So we'll be working that through. And just kind of remembering that this is a 3-year strategic plan. And even though these are 18, 19 indicators, a lot of these indicators will start this year and will continue. So some of these top 10, you'll see them next year and even the year after that. For a lot of these things are fluid and will go over a period of time. Number 9, I put a big check mark because it opened. The Center of the Arts. And this is a picture back in the summer when it was still being constructed. But it is a beautiful space, and I just want to remind everyone that we have the grand opening on January 28th, Monday, January 28th, which is next Monday evening from 6 to 9 p.m. And we have the younger students who will be there for the first hour and a half or so, 6 to 7:30. And we have grades 6 through 12 primarily from 7:30 to 9, but all are welcome for all 3 hours. We'll have a ribbon cutting program at 6 o'clock to kick off the 3 hours, and many performances in the auditorium, self-guided tours, information. The only thing we will not have is food. I'm sorry. We decided that with the new facility, the last thing we wanted is cookies in the auditorium, so we decided not to do that one. But it's very exciting to be able to see that that facility is open after many years of discussions and planning. The next one is a calendar ad hoc group. We've had a committee of 15 people, parents, teachers, administrators, even our recreation director who have sat on this committee. And we've had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings at this point since the beginning of the year. The committee has developed 4 essential questions or key questions that we're basically trying to abide by as we move forward. Number 1 is what's best for students, what's best for teachers and working with students, what's best for families and community, and what instructional and professional learning models best address the above 3 questions. So right now we're spending a lot of time doing research, looking at instructional time, professional development time, different models, gathering information and data, and we're just about to, in our next meeting that's coming up soon, starting to look at options for the calendar that would not take place until 2021. That calendar that the board would adopt will have some recommendations for revisiting our calendar. The next one is focusing on mental health. We have some really exciting things in the district this year around mental health. Not only is that a major area of our wellness plan, and we have a mental health group that works and has been meeting monthly, but we also have some large developments in our mental health programming this year that are part of the strategic plan. Eric Brown is the new mental health risk assessment and substance use coordinator for the district, and he's on hand to do risk assessments. We tend to have 30 to 35 a year. He also works with students who have some mental health needs that might be a little bit more involved, and he'll get involved with those as well. Dr. Aaron Blanchette is on staff as our school psychologist. We were contracting services out with our psych services until this year, and Dr. Blanchette is now in-house, and we're really excited about that. And the last one is a district at-risk team. We have a group of people, Julie Olson heads that up, a group of mental health professionals that get together and discuss cases, particular cases that are very involved and might need some district support or district level thinking. And that group meets monthly as well, and that just started this year. High school career field experience. We're just in the very beginning stages, and this will take at least the 3 years of the strategic plan, I think, to really have a great plan in place. But we have a steering committee for our pathways coordinator. We have a new coordinator this year, Dan Westhoven, and that group has been beginning planning for what does career experience for high school students mean, and what should every student have before they graduate from Gorillaz High School that will help them prepare for success later on in the workforce. And right now, Dan Westhoven is actually planning, or we've begun planning, what it might mean to have a career internship fair for either some or many of our students at the high school. We're also talking about how to communicate our extended learning opportunities. We have more students this year, over the last 3 years, taking ELOs, outside experiences that they can get credit for in high school. So we're very excited about those developments around ELOs as well. Next one is creativity and innovation. So Sally Laughlin and Corey Muncie are going to be heading up a committee that starts later this spring. And we're going to pull that committee together to start looking at ways that the strategic plan asks for in terms of looking for innovation in the classroom, making sure that we're not squeezing that out or we're not leaving that behind. Obviously, with No Child Left Behind in place for 15 years, there was a huge interest in looking at test scores and in looking at prescribed methods of teaching and learning. There's also a piece of us that knows that we need to branch out and get back to some of the creativity in the classroom that's been lost over the years as a result of some federal and state mandates. And the other one is identifying interested teachers on project-based learning or service learning, and those opportunities will come out of this particular committee. And then the other thing I'll add is that for all of our new staff to the district, if they're in their first year with us in the district, we're doing some work around brain research. I actually did a session with all of our new teachers a couple weeks ago around brain research for the 21st century classroom. So that's another piece that we started this year. Obviously, number 4, you're very familiar with. The idea of starting an elementary education task force and looking at possibilities for facility design, grade configurations, looking at our enrollment, all those things will be very important and critical. And again, we're trying to start that task force up hopefully by the end of February. And pre-K will be a big piece of that. The wellness plan, Carol MacArthur heads up the wellness committee. And under the wellness committee, we have 6 ad hoc groups. This is a very active area of our strategic plan right now. We have mental health, digital citizenship, homework, substance use, nutrition, and movement and physical activity. And we have administrators, teachers, parents, and students who are on all of these 6 ad hoc groups. And all of them have started. Most of them have met 2 or 3 times already this year. And then our wellness committee is overseeing all of these ad hoc groups. So Carol meets with that particular group every couple of months, checks in on the work of these 6 groups. It's actually a great system that we've got in place, and there's a ton of really exciting work, and you'll be hearing more about that, especially at the end of the year. The homework group, for example, is looking at the role of homework. How much is too much? When should we be giving it? The homework policy will be a big piece of what they're reviewing in the next few months. The digital citizenship group is looking at scope and sequence. How do we make sure that our students are using technology in an appropriate and safe way, and that it's maximizing its use? The substance use group is looking at policy JICH. If you recall, a few years ago, the board considered that policy, considered making changes, and then tabled it, and made sure that there was more thought put into it by a group of people, and that's where the strategic plan idea came from. Mental health, that group has been looking at connecting staff to mental health resources, looking at other services that we're providing to students in our district, and we'll be continuing to do that over the next few months and next couple of years. Looking at wellness, facility access. The movement and physical activity group is starting to look at that. And then nutrition, right now they're doing visits to school kitchens with the food service director, John Carlson, and starting that work around nutrition and what it means in our school district. So there's a lot of work that has started in the district and a lot of activity here. Expanding RTI supports, basically protocols for looking at student data. We've started training our staff on what it means to look at student data. What is the importance, what's the relevance of looking at it, and what are some protocols that make sense when groups of teachers are looking at student data. The district has an RTI plan. The DLT, the district leadership team, has been very active in developing a vigorous RTI plan to make sure that we are not, that we're intervening where we need to be. We're screening students for interventions, and that we're following through on those interventions when students need academic or behavioral support. And then a big piece of this is looking at non-categorical supports. We have many classrooms now in the district where there's a regular education teacher and a special education teacher working side by side with a group of students in the same classroom. And that's been a very thoughtful and important change in our practice over the last few years. And then number one is supporting the core. And there's a lot of work that's begun in this area. Atlas is our curriculum software program, and for the past 3 years or so, we've been asking our teachers, more than 3 years, but we've really been asking them in the last 3 years to make sure that Atlas is a place where we keep our curriculum, where we have learning targets. We have a ways to go. We're certainly not done, but that work is something that takes years and years and years to get where you want it to be in the district. The Literacy Audit, Sally is heading that up. We have an outside consultant, Dr. Eileen Harris, who is working with a leadership team of about 15 people in literacy across the district, K through 12. And that group is identifying gaps in our literacy programming and ways to mitigate those gaps and find ways to program effectively for our students. The next one is high impact teaching strategies. What are those research-based practices in every classroom in our district that we want to say we hang our hat on? Those are things that we know work with kids. And there's a lot of research that's out there right now. We're living in a time where research is everywhere. John Hattie has taken all that research and put it in one place. And we are using his work to inform a lot of the high impact teaching strategies in our district right now. And finally, Proficiency. I know some of you sit on the Proficiency committee. We have another Proficiency committee that was started, and Sally is heading that up. And basically, the idea is to revise the graduation policy and be more in line with what MSAD 51 believes proficiency should look like. The state, as we know, in the last legislative session, relaxed that law and said that they're reverting that back to the local school districts to decide what proficiency looks like at the local level. So that's something that group will be doing. So I'm not going to go through the indicators. These are all the indicators for this year, and they're color-coded in different ways. Blue means wellness. College and career is in orange. Green. Pink is creativity. Purple is miscellaneous. And early childhood is in orange. And there's a couple of red inks in there. The pre-K plan, originally the strategic plan said the pre-K plan was responsive to state legislation and possible regional effort. I crossed out possible regional effort because we were having discussions with Yarmouth and Falmouth, and those discussions were around starting a program at the old North Yarmouth Memorial School. When the town of North Yarmouth voted to move forward with plans for the new West Cusco Inn, we decided to obviously stop talking about that particular option because it didn't exist. The other red ink is continue developing ELO experiences and explore how students are assigned in the master schedule. We took out explore how students are assigned in the master schedule because there's multiple ways of developing ELOs, and we didn't feel that that particular option was one we wanted to be boxed in looking at. There's a lot of creative ways to design this. This was one area when we were developing the strategic plan that we thought we would put a lot of emphasis on, and we've decided not to do that at this point. And then the last red ink was introduction to all new staff, and new is in red. Originally, we were going to introduce to all staff, but given the enormity of the strategic plan and where we wanted to put all of our effort on certain areas, this was an area we thought would be better utilized with all of our incoming new teachers to the district and really getting them up to speed on some of those research-based practices. We're doing research-based practices with all of our staff anyway around the hits that I mentioned earlier, but this is really around brain research and making sure that as a teacher enters this district, they understand that's one of the things that we're working on, is looking at research around the brain and making sure that we're programming for kids in that way. So that was changed as well. And this just gives you a quick scorecard as to things that have been started. Just kind of keep in mind we're only in January, so most of these things will have just been started, just a few months into the strategic plan. These are year one indicators only. Some of these indicators will slide into year two as well. Some of them will even slide into year three eventually. Some of these, by the end of the year, you'll see some completions of things that continue. There'll be things that will not be completed and will continue next year. Some of these indicators, they say year one, but they were meant for 3 years or whatnot. It just gives you a quick indication of the things that have started by now. The things that don't have an X and haven't started, I think in the next 2 to 3 months will have started. We certainly are planning for all of those things. And then the last thing is that there'll be a year-end progress report for the strategic plan, and that will be presented in June, just to give you a year-end look at all of those indicators. So, if there's any questions or comments?
I do. That's all right, Kate?
Yeah, go for it.
So when you're preparing for the June, when you're preparing for the June review, I think, and this might be self-serving, but it'd be helpful to see beyond just the checklist what the implication of some of these have been. So if I look at something like introduction to all new staff around modern brain research and motivation, what's been the impact on the way that they engage with their students? What has changed in a year-over-year basis as these incremental steps into the strategic plan occur? And I think looking at these, the evidence of improvement is there for most of those, and that really would be helpful if you could do that.
So touching on impact?
Just showing more than just the words on the page, how it's created a better learning experience for the students, or a better experience for the teachers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's good feedback for that. And some of the, I'll also kind of reiterate and just say that some of the impact we might not see this year. So some of it obviously we would, and if it's completed, we would be able to do that. But some of the impact for some of these is going to be ongoing for 2 or 3 years.
Well, I fully understand that, but I think in some of those, especially those things that have been instituted across all of staff, there may be some things that just jump out, and even if it is things that have begun progress in a positive direction, there should be enough that we could have a good discussion about.
Just looking at this, this presentation, even though we just have approved this plan and, looked at this, I'm constantly amazed at just how much work these strategic plans involve. They're just so multifaceted. Now that we are, a few months into this next plan, how are you and the administrators feeling in terms of the workload? Because I know that was something the board was really concerned about. The board was almost feeling like the plan wasn't working for us. We were kind of working for the plan a little bit. I know because it was just so ambitious. And this one looking at this now, feels just as ambitious.
I don't want to speak for the leadership team, but I'll just say that it is ambitious. I think we tried to pare it back while we were developing it and saying we're going to try hard to do that. I think the issue with that is there's so many things that we know we want to move forward on. It's making those decisions about what we don't do. And certainly there was a lot of things that did not get into this, whether it was through the community dialogue, through the surveys, that were conducted last year for the strategic plan as we're developing it. But there's a lot of stuff that did make it in, and it's a lot of work. The district leadership team does carry that work. There's a lot of people involved in this, but they're obviously the ones that are leading a lot of the work. You heard me say the same names over and over. All of them are involved in multiple different ways. A lot of our leadership meetings are around the work. I would say most of them are around the work in the strategic plan. So most of our time at those meetings are spent on on strategic plan related pieces, no matter what it is. I think one of the positive things about this strategic plan that might be a little different from the last one is that we've got a lot of people involved in a lot of different groups. So for example, the wellness plan, we have those 6 ad hoc groups. There are tons of people involved in, parents, students, staff members, and administrators are involved in those groups. So I think there is some distribution of the work, and that's always the goal, is to get as many people involved in the strategic plan as possible. But you're right, it is a very ambitious plan. I wouldn't be surprised if I come to you at the end of the year or even next year and say, you know what, there's a couple things that we're just not going to be able to do. There's only so many things, that make sense in doing. And as we get deeper into the plan, much like we did with the first plan, there was 3 or 4 things that we ended up not doing that were in the plan, just because we ran out of time, and that just didn't make any sense to do it.
I know
But we'll get input from the board on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't speak for the whole board, but, I would be open to hearing if, there are some things. I mean, all of this is super, super important. It's going to have a huge impact on learning, but we can't do everything for, but thank you for the administrators who are here tonight. This is a lot of work on from you folks, so thank you.
It is.
And thank you, Jeff, for your leadership on this.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything to add, questions? And Jeff is always happy to talk about the strategic plan
I
if you
love
were
it.
to
I
email
love it.
him. So
It's my favorite.
feel free to do that if you have any further questions. And our next item is our superintendent's report. Thanks, guys. You guys don't have, I don't, can we dismiss our administrators? Thank you.
Got the wave.
Still second.
You got the wave. I'd like to just first give a shout out to our custodial and maintenance crews, Don Foster especially, for all of their work. As you know, we had a huge storm, not as big as they said it was going to be, but it was still very messy. And our custodial and maintenance crews are on our campus all the time during these storms, even when there's students and staff not here. They were here all weekend clearing the campus. So I just want to really throw that out there. They're even here when there's huge water spills in vestibules. We just had a broken pipe in the high school, as many of you know, a couple hours ago. So first people on hand were Don Foster and the custodial and maintenance crews. So I just want to give them a lot of recognition. They do a lot of work around here, and it often goes unnoticed, but it really keeps this campus in good shape. As I mentioned earlier, the Gorillaz Center for the Arts opening is Monday evening, January 28th, 6 to 9 p.m. We're really excited for it. We've had a group of people working on this evening. We'll have a lot of performances. We'll have visual art as well that will be up from students. And we have an entire detailed schedule. If you'd like to see the schedule, please visit our website. We have it up there. 6th graders last week celebrated the halfway mark. This is literally the halfway mark of their entire K through 12 education, halfway through their 6th grade year. And we had students doing this in a lot of creative ways, painting their faces halfway, changing classes halfway through their class blocks, all in good fun. And so they only have 6.5 years till they graduate. So we had students at the middle school also who were very involved in raising some money for Guatemala. 6th graders in Mrs. Adams' class held a Pie Year Teacher contest to raise money for a village in Guatemala. The students raised $433 to build a trampoline or purchase a trampoline for the students in Guatemala, which is something that they do not have right now. We had 17 middle school staff members who, in the lobby of the middle school last week, got a pie put in their face by a student. So each of these 17, and this raised the money for the trampoline. So that was a really great cause, and Mrs. Adams' students really learned a valuable lesson in helping students halfway across the world. The middle school FLS class decided that they found the tagline, engage, empower, and inspire inspiring enough to make it beautiful. So if you go into the GMS FLS Functional Life Skills class at the middle school, you will see this very beautiful collage of different colors and pieces of art with the words engage, empower, and inspire on it. And we actually have it up on our, or we're going to be putting it up on our website so that everybody can see it as well. A budget primer. We have some more videos that have gone out. A second video went out last week in the newsletter. This was around per pupil expenses. So if you're interested in the MSAD 51 budget, please go to our website, and that video is up there. We send them out through our newsletters every Thursday as well. And it will be in my blog on Thursday if you'd like to look at that as well. I'd like to congratulate Hallie Price for winning honorable mention in the Scholastic Award for Digital Art, Moments Past. Hallie now has the opportunity to compete in the 2019 Main Region Scholarship Exhibition, which takes place at the Maine College of Art in January. So we're excited to pass along those congrats to Hallie. And the GHS debate team competed in the National Qualifiers Tournament held in the State House in Augusta, which produced some great results for Greeley. Congrats to Zach Whiting, took first place. Carson Bell took second place, and Ben Hall was an alternate. And they'll all be attending the Nationals in Dallas, Texas in late June. And Ren Payne and Victoria Bore were also important participants in this first showing of this debate team. So we're really excited that they were able to participate and did a great job. And today, the high school had an all-school assembly where we had many students from the civil rights team. We had some of our staff members as well. Each got up and recited or read a piece of Martin Luther King Jr.'s mountaintop speech in front of the entire school. I had a chance to drop by, and it was very moving. Wasn't you couldn't hear anything in that gym as his speech was read. A really powerful piece of prose, and I think the students were really very intrigued by Dr. King's speech. So that's my
Great.
report.
Thank you. This next item is public comment. Seeing none, I will move on to committee reports. And we'll start with finance with you, Mike.
Sure. Last week, we met with the Town of Cumberland Finance Committee and had an exchange of information about our respective forthcoming capital projects. That was interesting and productive. Tomorrow we meet again, and we're going to get into some early budgeting work, seeing some of the very first numbers coming from our fearless leader, Scott.
Great. Kevin, policy?
So we had a meeting this evening and began work on a few, refreshed one policy and looked at another one. We also, before the fire alarm, had a couple of minutes to talk about reprioritizing some of the ones that are out in front of us. Our next meeting eludes me. I believe it's during the week of the 4th, but I will update the group.
Curriculum.
We also had a meeting this evening with it was our second stakeholder group for the graduation policy. We were having a great conversation until the fire alarm went off. We will be holding our third meeting on March 4th at 5:30. And I did want to say that you can put a red mark that we have started that work on the strategic planning spreadsheet that you just showed us, Jeff, because we have started it.
Awesome. That's good.
Scott, negotiation update?
Sure. We've started negotiations and everything is going great.
Facilities, Mike?
So facilities, sort of a theme here. Our joint meeting with the Finance Committee was postponed due to snow. Then we've had some difficulties getting the entire group together. However, we will reconvene again on February 12, 2019. Some of the topics will include the outcome of the workshops on February 4th, some ongoing conversations about the bus garage, and then just discussions about the facilities capital plan.
Great. Back to you, Tyler, for environmental stewardship.
We have not met since our last meeting as a board. Our next meeting is February 13th at 3 p.m. at the Wilson School, and we did get an email from student government here at the high school that they are interested in speaking with us about some solar projects that they are interested in talking about on a bigger scope, so look forward to meeting with them.
Great. Tara, do you have a student report to share with us?
Yeah, so unfortunately Madeline couldn't be here tonight, but we've had a good couple weeks at the high school. Last week was midterms week, so today was the first day of second semester, so everyone's kind of getting back into like our normal schedule. Like Mr. Porter said, we had a nice little assembly today to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so that was nice. And we're looking forward to the grand opening of the Greeley Center for the Arts this week. During advisory, we're having a few class meetings to kind of introduce people who haven't been into that new space yet, to kind of show them around. So that's exciting.
Great, thank you. Next item is communications. I think I would just echo next Monday's opening event for the Greeley Center for the Arts. I hope to see a lot of members from the community there. And then we have some items for action which are policy related. So Kevin, I will let you walk us through that.
Thank you. So we have two things. There were three items included in the board packets today. Two things that are final reads are actually items for action, and then there is a first read item in there. The first thing in there is actually, I'll make a motion to delete the arts and technology education policy.
So moved.
Second.
So for discussion on this one, this according to Drummond and Woodsum, this is really a redundant policy that we don't need. This governs the PATHS program. And Jeff, is there any additional insight that you want to provide for that?
No, it's just not necessary that we have a specific policy about the particular vocational center that we send our students to.
So you have to call the vote.
All right. So all in favor of deleting this policy? I should be clear. Okay.
Okay, so the second item that we have is very similar to the last one. This is deleting an older policy, which is personnel goals and priority objectives. I make a motion that we delete this policy per advice of Drummond and Woodson.
Okay. So all in favor of deletion of this policy? Oh, no, sorry.
I'll
Motion.
second.
So then in terms of, but before we vote, this is just one that dates back to 2002. It isn't necessary. It references the word personnel that died off in the early 2000s. Jeff, any additional context to offer with this?
No, any sort of language for personnel is basically in other policies now. We don't need this separate policy on this.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor of deleting policy GA? Okay.
So finally, the last thing that is in here is for your viewing pleasure. This is the athletic trips policy, which is IJOB. And highlighted in red are some of the changes. These updates were made or proposed with the guidance of David Shapiro and Eliza Miller, who did quite a bit of work to align this with our other trips policies. When you get a chance to review these, I would draw your eye to the red text as well as the cross references that are in there. If you have questions, suggestions, or any other guidance on that, please don't hesitate to send a note to my email.
Just initially looking at this, I think these changes are really good. I think it really makes for a strong policy. So we'll be voting on that next meeting, right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and let's see, the next motion. Would anyone like to make the motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Or second?
Second.
I still can't get it right, guys, sorry. All in favor? Thank you.